As a band, if you release the album of the year, for example, that's usually a high point of a career. It's seldom that one band is able to score multiple albums of the year within their career. I know this has nothing actually to do with Faith No More, who actually just released an album, about 18 years ago in 1997 entitled Album of the Year. They didn't have the Album of the Year that particular year, but how do you follow that up? Well, 18 years later, we're finding out here in 2015 with Soul Invictus, the first new album from Faith No More in nearly 2 decades. That's right, some of you have actually lived your whole entire life without there being a brand new Faith No More album to digest. So, for a lot of you, this is probably an introduction to the band, if not something where your expectations are not quite as high, either that or quite so pronounced as some of the other members of the community. So your first album in 18 years, man, that's got to be hard to do. It's got to be a difficult endeavor. A lot of bands have been doing this lately, and they've been doing pretty well, so apparently they know what they're doing. At least that's what they say. Soul Invictus is an interesting album. I mean, these guys are an interesting band, Faith No More. They're very experimental, very alternatively minded. Mike Patton and the boys are probably one of the strangest purveyors of sound that are out there, still to this day, really. I mean, there's avant-garde bands and a lot of other real travelers of the sonic universe that definitely traversed some weirder places, but it really seems that Faith No More has always consistently been very much on board with the weird train. And the one thing about Superhero, whenever we talked about this a couple of months ago, is that it seemed like a very simplistic song, one that seemed to try to harken back some of the days of songs such as Epic from The Real Thing, and it just was a song that didn't quite reach that expectation, it didn't reach that height. And whenever you listen to the remainder of Soul Invictus, you start to realize that that's exactly what this song is sort of designed to be. It's designed to be kind of the epic of the album. It's designed to be the kind of accessible single of the disc, but just does not have that same level of momentum. That's really not a good start, but actually it is. By saying that Superhero is probably one of the weaker tracks on this album, it's giving the rest of an album a nice boost, a nice piece of acclaim. Now, this is not an album that's going to have the same distinct level of exploration that we're used to from Faith No More. This is not to the level of some of their early 90s to mid-90s material, but it's definitely, there's enough of a change in there and within this music to really give it a nice flavor. I want to look specifically at 2 songs from the second half of this album before we start to look at this as a whole, and that's Motherfucker and Matador. Motherfucker was actually the first single that they released, and a lot of people really kind of praised this track, really enjoyed it. I found it to be a little bit simple as well. I really didn't think that it was all of that great, but then we got right to Matador right after this, track number 9 on this near 40-minute long affair, a 6-minute long track that almost serves as this album's version of The Real Thing, the track, where it has that extension period to it, where it has a little bit more room to breathe. It compositionally has a lot more to offer than its preceding track, Motherfucker. And Matador just has a really strong presence to it. It has a fantastic element to it. And this is where I feel that the experimentation and the overall knowledge of sound and music and tone is really working to Faith No More's advantage, considering they're able to set a very clear and concise mood with this song and really play with it as these 6 minutes pass and really kind of raise and lower your own feeling toward it based off of a simple tonal or a key change, which is extremely, extremely nice. Now, overall as an album, this is one that feels slightly jilted. It's one that definitely surprises, but it doesn't do so in a way that is completely off-putting. Its 40-minute runtime certainly works advantageously to it in the fact that it doesn't overstay its welcome. However, there are some moments where it feels a bit off-balance, just a tad. But you know what? For a Faith No More album, that's exactly what you want. See, with some bands, that off-balance nature is a killer because it destroys momentum and it absolutely incapacitates or even beheads flow. But with a band like Faith No More, this actually works to their advantage. It keeps a listener slightly off balance. It keeps them off of their guard, or their guard is always up just enough where they're able to really reveal something to a listener with each passing moment that this occurs. Every single time that they kind of throw a curveball there to the listener, it really seems to work in their favor, because it's typically a curveball that makes musical sense, but just doesn't seem like it the very first couple of seconds that it hits. And then you realize the whole thing has a greater point, and you feel silly, because you figure you should have seen it coming. You've listened to Faith No More, you should know. But they still have found ways to surprise us. I really praise Matador as a song, but what's interesting is From the Dead. From the Dead, the very last track on this album, I almost feel like this is one of those songs that, if I were a band that had an 18-year hiatus, I would write a song like this. It's corny as shit to do, but Faith No More gives no fucks. And it's a nice little metaphor about somebody who's literally back from the dead. And you could easily say that the same could be said about Faith No More. That this is the heralding comeback song. This is the song that is saying, hello, we are back, how are you doing? And we don't know how long this comeback will last. We don't know if this is the only album that we will get from Faith No More, or if this is a longer-term commitment. However, this is a nice little track to end the album, which is, it's interesting that it's at the end, because so many bands fall into the trap of putting it right out of the gate, and it immediately starts a lot of those albums out on a very cheesy, predictable, and very dull, and a very dull point. But that's not what happens here. In fact, here it's once I reached this track, I kind of just had to chuckle at it a little bit, and really, musically speaking, I enjoyed it. Musically speaking, I enjoyed this entire record. Like I said, the slightly off-putting nature of some of the flow is by design, and it's something that certainly works very well for the album. I feel like in the middle portions, it gets a little bit, there's a little bit of similarity there, which can be a bit hurtful, but at the same time, it's a group that, if they're going to write the second generation next great Faith No More song, I expect it to be actually the next one. I expect it to be the next album, where they've really kind of take a couple more leaps instead of kind of announcing to the world that they are back. So that would be when I would expect the hugely experimentative or the hugely influential album. We all can't be Accept here and come back with a new singer and just crush things for 3 straight albums. What that band's doing is insane. I would give this album an 81 out of 100. I really enjoyed it. I think it was a really nice listen. I think it didn't overstay its welcome, which really aided to its favor there, and I think that the tracks were definitely ones that fit in the Faith No More catalog and belong there. But what did you guys think about Soul Invictus? It's streaming right now over at NPR, so you do have the opportunity to check this one out prior to its release on Tuesday. This is one to pick up, though. This is one that I highly recommend big sales figures for, because this band not only deserves it, but this album is solid, too. What did you guys think of it, though? What did you think of Soul Invictus? Let me know in the comments, and I will talk to you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.